So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining and listening. This is my sister Naama, who who basically agreed to join and share about the past year for her during the war and the experience of what it's been like to be part of an injured family and that whole experience. So first of all, Mehmet, thank you for joining and being and agreeing to do this. And we'll now have space for basically hearing Yonatan's story. So yeah, I'm gonna leave the stage to you, and basically we'll start not from the injury itself, but from beforehand how you and Yonatan met, and then maybe you could also introduce yourself during this process as well.
Okay. Well, I am Naama, Nata's sister. Um, Yonatan and I first met when we were 16. We were both counselors in Bnei Akiva, which is a youth group movement. So that's when we initially met. We only started dating 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We kept in touch over the years, and then we started dating later. We got married a year and a half ago. The war started after we were married for half a year.
Wait, before you jump into there, I'll say, how about you just share a little bit about yourself? You're studying mechanical engineering.
Studying, yes. Mechanical engineering at the Technion in Haifa. I didn't really study this past year, but I'm supposed to be starting in November. My fourth year. Um, what else do you want to know?
No, that's good in that case. So you basically said you met Yonatan, you were part of a youth group. Do you want to share a little bit about the story about how you like reconnected? What happened there?
A mutual friend was getting married, and in Israel, there's a tradition to kind of like a countdown, and then people, like different friends or of the bride and groom, send pictures with different numbers counting down till the wedding. And one of Yonatan's friends from Yeshiva was organizing this mutual friends countdown. And then he saw a picture of me with the number 13, I think it was. And then he sent me a message about that. And then it kind of, galgel. My English is not that good. What?
Your English is fine, Vivek.
And then it went on from there. I had to give him a little push, but it worked.
So you jumped basically to the war. So the war happened, like you said, how long after you got married?
It was 6 or 7 months. Got married in March of 2023. And the war, yeah, it was 7 months, more or less.
And what happened on October 7th for you? Well, what did that day look like? Where were
We were in
you?
Jerusalem with Yonatan's parents for Simchat Torah, for the holiday. I am the one who heard the sirens first at 8 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and I thought I was confused because we didn't. I just suddenly heard sirens, bomb alerts, and we woke everybody up and we went to the shelter in the house. And then we didn't go out that day. We celebrated at home with his 7-year-old sister, just doing laps around the dining room table. And we heard pieces of information during. It was also, I think, was it Chag or also Shabbat? I don't. It was.
It was both. It was Shabbat and Chag, yeah.
We heard pieces of information during the holiday, and won't forget that his mom said it was like towards the end of the holiday. She said, "Remember this time. It's not. This is the best it will be until
Wow.
because Motzei Shabbat, you open your phones and you understand what actually happened and the immensity of the situation." And she was right. So that was October 7th for us. Yonatan wasn't called up yet for reserve duty, but he expected to be. So he drove up to Haifa to get his reserve duty supplies, his uniform, and anything he needed. And he brought clothes for me, and then drove back that same night, back to Jerusalem. And he was called up the next morning to go up north. They were intended to be up north, and supposedly because their unit, their division, I don't even know how to say the words in English.
What's the word you want to say?
His gdud,
A battalion.
battalion was prepared, so they moved them down south. It took, for the first month he wasn't in Gaza because also they hadn't entered Gaza yet. They were training outside. They were training in down south, but in that area. And then they entered, I think maybe a week or two after the initial entrance into Gaza. I would see him the longest I hadn't seen him during the miluim, that's reserve duty in Hebrew, is 3 weeks. That was 3 weeks up to Hanukkah. And the first night of Hanukkah, he was released out. I think the next morning he came back for leave. And I call it my small little Hanukkah miracle, because he was supposed to go back one of the days, and then he ended up staying for another day, and then he even went back, and then for some reason they weren't going in, so he even came back for another day and a half. So it was like almost all the days of Hanukkah I actually had with Yonatan, which was very special. And then I guess a month or so, or a few weeks after.
Wait, before we get there. So I'll just say, so like, people, it's hard to comprehend what your life looked like during this time. So
I wasn't even at home.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you were supposed to start school. You didn't start school. Like, what was your routine like? How often would you see him? How often would he come out, basically? And I know this was difficult, and you just shared kind of what was uplifting. So how do you, like, what was this period of life? What was this period of time like?
One thing that was difficult was also, Yonatan wasn't with me. He was also in some dangerous situations, which was on its own difficult to deal with. But I was staying with our parents at the time in Jerusalem. What was I doing? I did have an exam that I hadn't done yet, and it got postponed over and over again. And also the school year didn't start. It was supposed to start in October, and it never started. So for those, I guess 2 months or so, I was just being busy at home. I baked a lot of cookies and stuff that we would send to Yonatan, to his reserve duty, and to his pluga. How do you say pluga?
Platoon.
So I was busy with that. I tried to stay busy doing some things, even helping my aunt organize her house. Like, she had a lot of things that were waiting to be organized. She lives close by to my parents, so I would just like go out of the house every day again, spend half of the day or so with her, helping her clean up. I was with my family also. My brother was also on reserve duty, so the house was experiencing it. I think I was also with Netta a little bit. I even helped you with a girl. Well, there was only one girl at the time.
Yeah.
Because I remember Liana, but
I was pregnant at the time.
Yeah. Guess that, just time passes also. So Yonatan, at first when he wasn't in Gaza, I would hear from him almost every day. Usually it was with his phone, so he would send me updates, pictures, what he's doing, what he's eating. They had a lot of people volunteering and bringing them nice food to eat almost every day. And once he was entered Gaza, he told me that like a few hours before, he said, "I'm going in. Like, I won't be available," because he doesn't go in with his phone. Not supposed to go in with your phone. So that was more difficult. And then again, there's not much you can do. Also, if you're like, I tried not to follow the news too much because it was very nerve-wracking, or I felt that, for me at least, it wasn't helpful. What?
I said it was depressing.
Yes. And then I'll just wait till I would hear from him again, telling me that he's coming back. So sometimes it was within a few days or within a week. Sometimes it was 2 weeks. Sometimes it was mamash like 3 weeks.
So he's in the Armory Corps, yeah?
Yeah, so he works the tanks. They have 4 people working in the tank at all times. There's a driver, the commander of the tank, the, I guess, totran, like a shooter.
Yeah.
Shooter, and a loader. So Yonatan is a shooter. So a lot of times they would escort pinuim, evacuations.
Yeah, evacuees.
Evacuations out of Gaza if it was injured people, soldiers or something like that. So then at those times when he would be on the border or even out, so then he would be able to contact me. But it didn't happen often.
Wow.
And then I found myself like hoping to hear from him maybe on those occasions when he's on the border, but then it was weird because I didn't want to hope for people being injured and having to be evacuated. So it was also very weird. So that was that's pretty much I think my experience.
I'll also add one more thing that you told me that, you know, in the beginning you were constantly nervous because you don't have that communication. You're nervous that something is going to happen at any moment, God forbid. So you said, I have to live my life. I'm going to put it out of my brain. And if something happens, I'll deal with it.
Yeah. It took me, I think, even a month or a month and a half to realize that. But yeah, that's where I was. That's where I was at. Like my mindset was also leading up to the injury. It was just out of that option wasn't even in my mind. It's like, okay, he's coming back. We're going to start school soon because school was scheduled to start in January. And my exam had taken place a week or two beforehand, so I started going up to Haifa back home, getting the home organized. We had only moved into this apartment a week before October 7th, or a week and 2 weeks. So the house wasn't even organized. I wasn't really there. So that first time I went back, a little bit before January, I started organizing the house. It also kept me busy. It wasn't really nice to be living alone, but my neighbor was also there. Her husband was also in reserve duty, so we had each other. And
I think that leads us to the day of the injury, basically. So you were saying, like, you really were preparing that you're going back to school, that there's this clear, like, transition that's happening. And then what happened what date was it? And how did the day, like, come about? Also, when was the last communication you had from him before the injury?
So what happened was, the semester started on January 14th. The week before that, Yonatan was released for Wednesday morning till Friday morning. And we were finally, that was the first time he was released, and we were back in Haifa. That was the first time that I had actually done laundry and washed his uniform. Just now, like, in a small anecdote, because up until then, it was either my mother or his parents were doing the laundry that he brought home. And then a week later, so that week following, he went back on Friday. Sunday, school started, university started. And then that Friday, January 19th, I had left Haifa to spend Shabbat with my parents in Jerusalem. And I was already at my parents' house. I'd even, luckily enough, I had eaten lunch. And then I got a phone call. Actually, first I got a weird phone call from, I don't know if I should tell this I got a phone call from Yonatan's father telling me about that they went to the nursery to buy succulents. And he just asked me, like, where are you? And then I said, I'm at my parents. Like, I had talked with them about that I'm going to be in Jerusalem for Shabbat or whatever. And then the conversation kind of got cut off. And a minute doesn't pass, and then I got a different phone call from an unknown number saying, hello, Naama. I said, yes. This is from the army. Your husband, Yonatan, was severely injured. There's a car from the army that's is on their way to your parents. That's where you are, and gonna pick you up and take you to the hospital. He's in Soroka in Beersheba. So start getting ready. Someone will come also to the house and help you get ready. At this point, I didn't believe them. Also, they had so much information that I said, this can't be. I didn't understand why they knew where I was. I was in where my parents live, and I was very confused. I was in mamash in shock and denial. I thought it was what I thought was some type of scam, or like even sounds funny now, but like Arabs or something, or not Arabs, but what's it called, terrorists, wanting to come and, I don't know, like bomb where I was gonna meet them or something. At this time, my mom was in the house, so I started walking over to her like a zombie, and I think I was already like very white, pale, and then she said, "What happened?" And she could tell something like really bad happened. She said, "What is it, Yonatan?" And I said, "I couldn't even speak." And then I was holding the phone this whole time. Then the woman could hear that I was in shock and wasn't really responding. And then she said, "Is anybody in the house with you?" And then I said, "Yes." My mom said, "You want me to talk to her?" So I gave the phone to my mom. And in these like 1 minute, I kind of took a deep breath and understood the situation. And then I took the phone back and I said, "Okay, I understand. I started just like thinking what I need to do, pack some stuff, get to the hospital." And then a few minutes later, a representative of, I guess it's like the injured,
Injured and bereaved. Yeah.
yeah. So
Like it's a position that what they do is assist families and also the injured and bereaved soldiers. So there's a position like that, and like these people basically come, like in this case, to people's homes to take you to the hospital, etc., to support you. Okay.
they're really amazing. Like, she came into the house and I felt like there was like an angel that came in to help me and support. And she told me everything to bring. She said, bring also a sweater, it might be cold, bring comfortable shoes. If you have any medications that you need to bring with you, toothbrush, like she mamash helped me like focus what I need to bring with me. And then we drove to down south to Beersheba.
So I want you to backtrack for a second. You mentioned the call from Yonatan's dad. Did you realize why they called you, or
No,
only
I had no clue.
afterwards?
Then on the phone afterwards, then the second phone call telling me that Yonatan was injured, I said, "Did you tell his parents?" Because they were just talking to me about succulents. And what happened was they were notified first, and then they asked them where do I live or where am I? And then the mother said the Technion, and then they, when the heat of the thing, they didn't even think about it again. Then some point when they were already on their way to the hospital, the people in the car, that were escorting them, told them, "Okay, there's a car. I'm leaving to Naama Technion. It's going to be there in 10 minutes." And then they realized that I was either on my way to Jerusalem or already in Jerusalem. They knew that I wasn't going to be in Haifa. So then they made the calls, and then and that's why Yonatan's father called me to understand where I was, if I was on my way or if I was already in Jerusalem. So he did it very well. I didn't suspect anything. It only ended abruptly, but and then the theme for the first few days was succulents. Like, we opened a WhatsApp group, to organize things, and we called it something like with succulents. It was kind of, it's not that funny anymore, but at the time it like seemed so um
A little bit of humor. Yeah. So at this point, you have no idea what his injury actually is.
I just know that it's they have different levels. It was severe, I guess, would be the worst. So it was one before that, or badly injured,
Right.
which is not good. It's not the worst, but it's like there are it's the third level out of 4, which when 4 is the worst. So, I didn't know what to expect. I was trying not to think about it, but when on an hour and a half ride, you have a lot of time to think. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, when you arrived at the hospital, what does that look like from that point on? And what are you feeling and experiencing?
So we had a lot of support at first. There were different types of soldiers, mainly girls or women, that their job was just to escort us or make sure that we're okay, take us from place to place. Also, we're not familiar with this hospital. So as when I came out of the car, the woman that had escorted me stayed with me. Wow. For a while, actually, until for even, I think it might have been a couple of hours. just didn't leave my side. She was with me, and then I met also other ones who worked at the hospital or stationed there. And then they took us up to the ICU. Yonatan was in a smaller ICU, the medical ICU, which only has like 8 beds. There's like a general ICU that's much bigger, so he was in the smaller one. As we arrived, so his parents had arrived before me, but they waited for me to talk to the doctors. So first they let us, they actually let us see him before they talked to us and explained like what exactly had happened. It was very surreal because as we entered the floor, like the entrance outside of the ICU, so a lot of people from his unit were already there. So you would see like uniformed soldiers. They weren't with him in Gaza. They are part of the flag.
Like the general battalion, the platoon. They weren't in the specific tank team, but they're part of the platoon.
No, Maflag, they're like, they do the... Never mind. Anyway, they were there as representatives from his platoon. And I could tell that they already knew something that I didn't. And, you know, they much looked at me and with these...
like with mercy, with like they felt bad, like they, you know.
Yeah, but I could see it in their eyes. It was very, because I didn't know what was going on. You know, I knew that they knew, and it was just a weird situation. You know, walking past them towards to see, and they knew who I was, and I didn't know who they were. Also, just like this whole weird situation. I went in to see him, and I could see his face was kind of red, and he was connected to a lot of different
tubes and
lines
machines
and tubes. Yeah. I didn't even think, but his parents afterwards told me that when they first went in, they started feeling feeling under the blanket, checking what is there and what isn't there.
Wow.
Because they didn't know anything yet, so they were waiting for me, and they let them go in to see him. I didn't even think to check that, but Baruch Hashem, his legs and arms, everything was there. I just saw him and I said, okay, he's here. He's like somewhat, you know, he's alive. Now, you have to remember, this was Friday. It was Erev Shabbat. I arrived at the hospital, maybe it was like an hour before Shabbat was supposed to come in. And we weren't even, like, we were thinking about Shabbat, you know, you need to light candles and Shabbat is going to come in, but it was in the back of our minds, you know, there's so much other things to deal with. It was also very, like a weird combination of things.
Yeah.
And then we entered luckily, like, for when he was there, the head of the unit was there on call, so he's the one who explained to us what was going on, much like the professor. So at first they were very optimistic. They said he had suffered a blast injury and some mild burns on his face and some other parts of his body, but not bad ones. And that it's mainly his lungs had suffered from the blast injury. And they said that he might need to be connected to an ECMO machine. They'll have to see within the next few hours what how things play out. But they said that this type of injury, the lungs are an organ that know how to regenerate themselves and know how to recover very well. They're very optimistic, and putting him on ECMO might be just for a short while. That's what they expect. They have some experience. They've had similar injuries from before that, unfortunately, that they had to deal with, you know, from previous soldiers who were injured and had similar injuries. So, as from my point of view, I was like, okay, it's bad, but it seems like they know what they're doing, and I was pretty optimistic. I thought we were gonna. Didn't expect at the time that we would be there for 3 months in ICU. Maybe after we talked to the doctors, then we sat down with people with the soldiers from his platoon, and they had told us from what they know, like from first investigation, what had happened. So they explained that an RPG had entered the tank not entered, but blast. Thing is that sometimes RPGs are shot at tanks, and they don't actually. A tank is supposed to is pretty strong, so it only hits the exterior of the tank. It doesn't penetrate the tank.
Right.
This time, for some reason, it hit exactly at like a certain angle. It was very specific that it was able to penetrate the tank.
Wow.
And they started explaining. So we knew about Yonatan, what his injury was. They explained that the driver had only suffered some smoke inhalation, and he was not injured badly. And the tank commander suffered from a lot of burns, but he was also in the same hospital in the general ICU. And that was it. And then I was counting in my mind, and I was saying 1, 2, 3. There's a fourth person. Why aren't they telling us about the fourth one? And afterwards, also a little bit of psychology that I don't remember where I heard it from, but you always start from the easiest to the hardest. At this point, they even didn't think to tell us about the fourth one. And I asked. I said, "What about the fourth one?" Because I did the math, and then they said that he didn't make it. He had died. He was killed on the spot because the RPG hit him first. And the problem was that his mom was in Switzerland helping her parents move, so they had to wait for her to come back to Israel to let out the information, or to what's the word?
Notify her.
No, she was notified, but they wait until the whole family knows, until they release the name of the
publish.
soldier. Yeah, to publish it. So they didn't tell us the actual name. I had guessed because I knew some of the people. Yonatan has told me stories about their time in reserve duty, but I didn't know for sure. So only on Motzei Shabbat, the end of on Saturday night, they released they published the name. So it was also difficult because dealing with all this and then knowing what happened to the other people, and just it was difficult. And then the hospital and the dining hall for the doctors on Shabbat, they do Shabbat dinner, like Friday night dinner, in that same hall. So we were led down there by the soldiers that were what's a better word than escorting?
That were like assisting, supporting
us. And now everybody, the families there, some of them were also eating with their injured soldiers. You could see someone with like bandages on their legs or in wheelchairs and stuff like that. And they were already experienced. They were used to it. They had been there a few weeks. Even some people who had only been there 1 week, it seemed like so long. And they already knew the place and knew what to do on Shabbat. And we were all in shock. We just needed to eat because we were also hungry, and just to do minimal Shabbat. At that point, also during the talk with the soldiers from his platoon, Shabbat had already come in. The sun had set, and we hadn't lit candles. So we only blessed on the lit candles down there in the dining hall. It's all just very weird. And then we ate. And at that point, someone that I knew also from the same youth group from Akiva, someone I actually, we were counselors together, came with his wife to give us a cake and for Shabbat. That same evening, he somehow he had heard, and they walked over to the hospital and found us. So that was very touching. They ended up kind of I don't know, supporting, but they brought us challahs a lot of times for Shabbat, and they kept in touch with me during the whole time that we were in Be'er Sheva, which was very nice and moving.
Yeah.
So that was the first experience. That Shabbat felt so long, even though it was only like 25 hours, but it was just the whole, like the first experiences of this new stage.
So I just wanted to say that, like, you didn't say it explicitly, but at this time, Yonatan is sedated.
Yes.
He's not conscious, And so even if they're feeling him because he can't communicate at this point, he's badly injured. And so he's also intubated. So they're helping him breathe, and he's also like unconscious purposely because his injury is so bad. Like he cannot be awake and
he
be
was
okay.
in a medically induced sedation. It wasn't that he was unconscious on his own.
Right.
He did lose consciousness immediately. He doesn't remember anything from that day. A little bit from that week.
Wow.
But they had to intubate him. He was on a respirator already at that point. And then he's also on an ECMO machine, which is even worse. It means that the lungs are not functioning on their own. Yeah, they put him on ECMO that same night. I got a phone call like 2 a.m. from the on-call doctor telling us that they are putting him on ECMO. They're connecting him because his condition had worsened. First week in the ICU.
Yeah, so let's talk about like the routine, that what was happening during this period of time. Yeah.
So the Army or the Ministry of Defense had rooms for us in a nearby hotel. It was like a 20-minute walk from the hospital, 5-minute drive. That same hotel had families of injured soldiers and evacuees from down south.
Wow.
At some point, a lot of them had moved to a new neighborhood in Beersheba or in the area. But at the beginning, maybe they even arrived. I think they were moved from a different hotel. I don't remember if they were there at first, but just like the hotel of the, just people in different difficult situations because of the war.
Yeah.
So we ate breakfast and dinner there. We had 2 meals, and most of the day we would spend in the hospital. So every day at 1:30 we had an update from the doctors. At first they had a lot of updates. At some point so this is later in the injury, but
yeah, it's fine.
So that gave us some type of framework for the day. Like we always made sure to be there at 1:30. The first month, Yonatan's brother, he's 19. He was with us for the whole first month. He got leave he's in regular army service. His first
like active duty.
reserve.
Yeah,
active duty. So he was, because of this situation, he was released for a month. He has like every soldier in active duty has a certain amount of days to be absent for different family situations or whatever, especially now. So that was very helpful that he was with me. He was with me a lot. I don't know the time. We would sit, even though Yonatan was sedated, we would sit with him in his hospital room. We would play music, or at some point we collected a lot of recordings from friends of his from different circles, and we would play those. I colored in a lot of how do you say it in English? Mandalos.
Yeah, mandalas. Yeah.
Mandalas. Sounds like okay. Mandalas. That was maybe I read some books, but I couldn't do much.
I just want to emphasize that you are like living in a hospital. Like people don't comprehend.
Yeah, that's where I
whatever
was. My stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a year of moving around.
Mamash. So tell me, like, what was happening? Like, obviously every day is very long and you felt it, but we were talking about that it was 3 months. And then at some point, something happened that he needed a lung transplant. And I'll just add that Yonatan is the first soldier worldwide who received a lung transplant because of an injury, not because of like non-functioning lungs or whatever. That usually that's why they do the transplant.
Like CF or something like that. What had happened was during those 3 months, the first few weeks they thought he was actually getting better. They were even thinking that they would be able to wean him off of the ECMO. But then even the first cultures that had come back that they took from the lungs or different parts of the body, he had a lot of bacteria that started growing in the lungs, and it was very difficult to what's it called, to
Heal
handle
to
or to
like
even try and eradicate. It just wasn't working because his lungs were so severely injured. So this is getting into a lot of like biology and medicine, but just I learned a lot of terms and
right.
stuff during this time. But his lungs weren't functioning, and it just went and got worse. So, and they tried different methods, trying to maybe get something to work, and it wasn't working. The worst part had happened when he was hemorrhaging from one of his lungs. It started, I think, and it was a little bit before Purim.
It
It
was
started
literally the
Wednesday
day before
night.
I gave birth.
Yeah, it was the day before you gave birth. Yeah, it happened. So during the night, he was hemorrhaging a lot, and then at 6 a.m, they had called us to tell us that we should come in. And it was a very difficult night, and still the event is not over yet, and they want to talk to us. So it turned out he had gotten maybe like 12 blood transfusions that night, which is crazy. Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you.
And the only way to stop, the bleeding hadn't stopped. So the only way to stop it was to do some type of procedure. It's called like a packing procedure. And they explained to us that at this point, they know for sure after this had happened that his lungs have almost zero chance of recovery, and it's best to just go officially to his only chance is getting a double lung transplant. And they said by doing this procedure, it packs, it's putting pressure on the lungs, and it just, it doesn't give the lungs any chance to inflate again. Or they were explaining that doing this procedure is saying that we're giving up on these lungs. They're not going to be functioning anymore.
Wow.
For those whole 3 months until this event, Yonatan was sedated and on ECMO. And he had some septic waves. How do you say that? Garsepti. There were days where he was doing
I don't know.
better. There were
Yeah,
days he was
septic
doing
waves. It
worse.
makes sense to
His
me.
blood pressure was what? A lot of ups and downs. And also, they had told us when we just entered the ICU, said the ICU is a roller coaster. There are better days and there are worse days, and it was exactly like that. You never knew what to expect. It was just some days I would go, and I had remembered like the different dosages and what medications he was getting and what they were for. And every morning I would enter his room and just like scan everything and notice if there were changes and why they changed, and start asking questions and what exactly had happened. Before this event, where they knew for sure that he needed to get a lung transplant, they had already talked to us about it. Like even a few weeks prior to that, they started doing the testing that they needed to do, blood tests, different types of things.
Groundwork.
And then this was they started what?
Groundwork.
You said? Yes. And then after this, they knew for sure that so he entered the lists and everything. Luckily, because it's also he was a soldier injured in the war and everything, so he was on the top of the list, one of the first places. And the days from then were very crazy because it was just they told us that if there's a possible donor, then he will be taken immediately to Tel Shomer Hospital. The thing is, there are only 2 hospitals in Israel that perform lung transplants. They're both in Center Israel. One is in Beilinson and one is in Tel Shomer.
Okay.
So he was planned to do it in Tel Shomer. So we were always just waiting. We didn't know what to expect. Because we could get a phone call out of the blue just telling us they found a donor and then he needs to move immediately without any preparation. But what they were hoping was that he would be stable enough to move him to be to wait in Tel Shomer ICU, and then he would already be there. And whenever there's a donor, he would go immediately just to the next room, to the operating room, and without having to get there immediately. And luckily that's what happened. So think they were just also waiting for there to be room in the ICU in Tel Shomer. So at some point, I think it was a week or a week and a half after that event, that they told us that there's room and that they're taking him to Tel Shomer. His mom was there, so she saw him out of Beersheba, and I arrived at Tel Shomer to greet him. And 5 days later, or 4 days later, he arrived on a Sunday. On Thursday, I got the phone call that they had found a potential donor, and they would know later that day if it will work out, and it did. And the following day, again on a Friday, early morning Friday, he was operated on, and 8 hours later, he was out of surgery, and it was successful. And then we started, and then we had 3 more weeks in the ICU there, and he slowly started waking up.
So I want to pause for a sec with this. So one, like, why is, obviously double lung transplant is crazy, but what does that essentially mean for, his life in general that you knew about in advance? And also I want to point out here, Yonatan was not aware this whole time, like, meaning this whole thing is happening and everything. He is not conscious that like a double lung transplant is happening to him. And you, as his wife, are the one who made that decision for him, that yes, this is going to happen. This crazy procedure is going to happen to him, even though he's been sedated for 3 months. So that, and also, what does that mean? Why were they trying so much to save his lungs? Obviously, it's best that he have his lungs, but like, what were the consequences you knew of in advance?
So a lung transplant from what I know, is the most complicated organ transplant, because it's an organ this is actually new information I only learned like last week, that's open to the air, or is more susceptible to diseases, or just anything in the air that can be transferred to the lungs. Whereas other organ transplants, like a kidney transplant or liver transplant, those are inner organs that are protected by the body. So a lung transplant is I think it's also the most complicated, also because of just the whole connections. The lungs are a very complex organ. Yeah. So the
consequences, or the results, yeah.
No, that's not the word I was looking for. But getting a lung transplant means that you would have to be on immunosuppressors for your whole life, so that your body doesn't identify the lungs as some type of
foreign object,
and it would start, and your body would start attacking the lungs. So that's for the whole life, which is not a very good thing. Also, just being an immunosuppressed, you need to be very careful not to catch any diseases. But people who go through a double lung transplant are or chronic.
They have chronic illnesses. Yeah, they get chronically sick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the best option, so they prefer to not have to go there as much as they can. It's better even to be with one lung of your own than to go through a double lung transplant. Also, it's not for us. It was the only chance to bring Yonatan back. But that was also difficult, understanding that that's the next step, because it's the only step. Because the whole time I was just hoping and hoping and hoping that we won't get there. It seemed like a really bad option. But that's where we are. It's not as bad as I had expected. Or as I.
So tell me about that. So he Baruch Hashem successfully had the lung transplant. What was the transition like? And we know that he's now released from the hospital, so we can just say it. What's the transition like, or the routine like, from that moment of the transplant up until like he was released? What is happening? He also woke up for the first time at this point.
So yeah, we're saying woke up, but it was a very slow process because he was on very high dosages of different types of sedatives, mamash narcotics. He was in
Withdrawal.
withdrawal. Yes, he was. At first, for the first few days after the operation, he was very sedated. Just to make sure that everything was good. Those were very critical days, and he successfully got through them. And then they slowly started weaning him off of all the sedation. And he was half with us, half not. His eyes were kind of open, but they were very red. Just from being closed for so long. It was a very weird experience because I didn't even know if he could hear me and what he knew or remembered. But he was very also agitated, I would say. It wasn't an easy experience. So it was weird because we were used to, it's, transitions of like having him kind of present. Also, he couldn't talk for a long time because of I don't know if it's called a ventilator or a respirator. There's a difference, okay. I remember, but whatever was helping him breathe, it was connected here through a trach. I don't know how to say it in English.
Through a tube.
Whatever. Yeah, it's tracheostomy, I think it's called in English. So because of that, he could only move his lips. And at first also he would like kind of talk very quickly, so it was difficult to read his lips. At some point I was the best at understanding him. But it took a while. It was very, so he was very frustrated because he, it was very hard to communicate, the like most basic thing. Also, because he was sedated for so long, he could barely, his muscles were all very, very weak. He couldn't even scratch his own nose. He couldn't like do this. I would always go. I could tell him kind of reaching, and then I would scratch his nose for him. He couldn't. Yeah, and he was also connected to a feeding tube. It was very unpleasant. Even waking up to that and just like feeling all the tubes and everything. I'm sure it was difficult for him. He doesn't remember a lot from the ICU, which is best, in my opinion. But he did have some, how do you call it? Hazayot? Hallucinations. Scary ones, not funny ones. They sound funny now that he tells them. He must remembers them vividly. That was also an experience from waking up. So in these hallucinations, also he had, I don't remember what the story is exactly, but he had gotten shot in his shoulder. So at one point, a doctor had come in, the lung doctor, and asked him, "How did you get injured?" And then he said, "I was shot in the shoulder." And then I realized that, okay, Yonatan doesn't know what had happened, nothing. He was a little confused at first. It's just ICU delirium. It's a known thing. But, just dealing with that as a first type of, experiencing him when he first woke up was challenging. Slowly he was getting more aware, and he was doing better. After 3 weeks, he was moved to rehabilitation, but like respiratory rehabilitation. So he was there for a month. That's where he was weaned off of needing the respirator. They slowly, it was first 2 hours without, and the rest of the day with, and then 3 hours. They do a very slow process. But the good thing was that hospital unit was an open, what's it called? I'm sure we could be there 24 hours a day. We could sleep next to him there. What? Ward, yeah. It's an open ward. So we took turns also sleeping with him because at first he didn't sleep very well. The difficulty also in ICU is that there are no windows there. So we couldn't tell what the day or night, between day and night. So it took a while for him to get on a normal sleep cycle. And it's also very difficult because when you're tired and you're so weak, it's difficult to also even, be working on physical therapy and doing things to it's called?
Strengthen yourself, get
Yes,
better.
to strengthen and get better. But he advanced a lot within that month. He became much more independent. And then after a month, he moved to the regular rehab for the general rehab for the soldiers that they had in Tel Shomer there. So those were all injured soldiers there, and there was a very fun atmosphere there. Good
It
vibes.
sounds ridiculous, but I'll just say, like, John and I visited this ward, like this ward that in Tel Shomer. We were actually in the one that's for breathing. We were there literally for 5 minutes. We've met 3 groups of people who are giving things for free: sunglasses, food, sandwiches, pastries. Okay, so this is the environment in which it says fun atmosphere. That's why. It's not like everyone's happy that they're injured. Chas v'chalila, no. It's just that there's a good feeling of like people coming to be with you and support and unity and togetherness. And I think that's what you mean by fun atmosphere.
Yes, that is what I mean. No, but the types of injuries that were there are, I wouldn't say they were I don't know, it's difficult to compare injuries, but the injured soldiers that were in this ward, it's also called returning to life. That's what there was a new ward open just for the soldiers, for the injured soldiers. So
I didn't mention this in the beginning. Maybe I should have, but I'll just say there's over almost 4,500 soldiers who were injured in this war as a result of the war. So it's important just to understand, like, that's the amount of people we're talking about essentially. And even just having like a few hundred people in the same ward, it makes sense why they would have a whole new ward just from people in the war.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we were there. Yonatan was there for another 3 months doing rehab. He advanced a lot during these 3 months. He finally, even the smallest thing, when the day that he moved to that rehab, he was finally able to put a sock on his left foot. That's like just small things that he wasn't able to do, or even put his own shoes on. It's difficult for him to bend down. Now he walks up and down stairs. He even started running for a short amount of times on a treadmill. So he's doing much better. He's here now. Can hear me. And then finally, after 3 months, he was released home. He's continuing rehab in a hospital in Haifa, daily rehab. He goes in for different treatments. And we're trying to get back on track, which is a little difficult now because we're currently in Jerusalem because of the situation up north. We could have stayed there, but it would have been more difficult for him because we don't have a bomb shelter in our apartment, but there's a general one in our complex. But it's not as good for him, for his lungs, to be in it's underground, so it's very stuffed, and also with children who carry a lot of diseases. Not carry diseases sound like, okay, yes, but they're more
susceptible.
Yeah, so we decided to just keep it safe and stay here. And also, his daily rehab was canceled at the moment because all the hospitals are prepared just for on call. Yeah.
Wow.
The hospitals up there even went underground. One of the main hospitals in Haifa.
It's underground?
No, they went underground now.
Wow.
This is just actualia, but
anecdotal. Yeah. So I wanted to say what was interesting, that when he was in rehab, he wasn't living in the hospital the same way when he was in the ICU. He was able to go home for Shabbat, and I know that he went out for a friend's wedding. So meaning already from that point you have a transition that, okay, get ready to leave type thing. Did you feel that?
Yeah, it was easier. We finally had some also time alone or whatever, because just being in hospital for so long is not that is difficult. But yeah, so we started being released for weekends from Thursday till Saturday night. At first, we spent most of those weekends in Jerusalem, either with with his parents or with his grandparents, and then with my parents. And towards his release from rehab, we also spent 2 weekends up in our home in Haifa, which was actually a good idea. Just getting used to the house. He was released 2.5 weeks ago.
Mazal tov.
Yeah.
Two or like three short questions before we finish and conclude. So one, before we talk about like future and summary for you, I want to go back for a second and just say like you speak a lot about the injury and the experience and also like what was difficult, but like you put your whole life on pause, on hold. There was a lot of things you didn't even talk about regarding dynamics, and which we don't have to get into. I don't want to get into that, but I'm saying like what did you feel would have been more of a help to you, and what would you recommend to others? Meaning, looking back now on your experience, is there anything that you feel like was missing, would have helped you more, would have supported you more as the wife of an injured soldier? Because I just feel like it doesn't get much noticed by people. Like we talk about the soldiers themselves, we talk about but like we're experiencing the war. We have the hostages and people who are killed and the bereaved families, and then there's just no room to talk about families of injured soldiers. So what would be what are your thoughts about what would have helped you and recommendations that you would give to others?
It's a good question. I think also something that's important to realize is that there's a limit to what other people can do and assist in these times. Sometimes it's just things that people need to experience, or that just it's that's reality. And luckily, I had a very close support system, which was my family. Netta, my mother, was very meaningful during this time. When we were surrounded by family, which is the first close circle. I think different people have different needs. I think the army was able to give us a lot of the surrounding support that we needed, even if it was just different bureaucracy things that needed to be done. But more than that, one thing that I heard a lot of people mention that I could relate with, I don't is that even friends from outside circles, or friends I haven't even spoken to in a long time, who just people who don't go through it don't actually understand it that well. It's not to ask how you are, just saying, sending my love, thinking of you, ending the sentences with a period and not with a question mark. Sometimes just being just seeing the questions is very
Frustrating because you have to
frustrating, or
answer.
sometimes it's so overwhelming. Yes, it's just so. Thank you, Yonatan. It's just the experience is so far from other people's. It's just it's just difficult to bring them in. That was just one tip that I could relate with. But more than that, a lot of times people who were giving out food to the families or to the soldiers themselves, to whoever was in the hospital, was very helpful. Because sometimes, during the craziness of the days, I wouldn't remember to eat, or it's difficult to just deal with that, to having to find food. I don't think I have anything else to add.
That's fine. What would be like your biggest tip or recommendation for somebody who might be going through this, or will go through this?
Luckily, at some point, I had someone had told me about a group that they opened independently for wives or partners of injured soldiers. So I joined this WhatsApp group, and it was very helpful. They meet every once in a while, and just being part of a group that women who are going through the similar experiences as me was very, very helpful for me, because we must understand each other. It's something else to be part of that group of experiencing the same thing. For me, it was very helpful. I know that some women at times it was either overwhelming or too much for them, but I think that's a good place to start. Also, sometimes know how to ask for help when you know what you need from people or certain people. getting over that first, sometimes either embarrassment or feeling, in Hebrew it's lo naim. How do you say lo naim in
Uncomfortable.
English?
Yeah.
Uncomfortable,
Uncomfortable.
getting
But
over
it's,
that and just asking for
yeah.
help, because so many people want to help and ask how. Oh, another thing is, if you're asking someone, how can I help, don't ask an open question. Offer maybe 3 or 4 options, and just because then a person is usually more open to choose one of those than just throw something out there. So if you're already giving options of things that you're willing to do, usually the person who needs the help will actually be more open to receiving it that way.
Yeah.
Um,
It's good. So 2 more things. So now, what are your plans, as much as you can plan for the future, but what is the plan? Yeah.
well, I'm planning to go back to school to restart my 4th year. In November, and Yonatan is also planning to start. He had actually taken one course this semester during his rehab, just to go and show how much he's back to himself.
Just to show you how smart Yonatan is.
He had an exam last week. Luckily, he was able to do that before we left Haifa.
Before you were
But
evacuated, yeah.
and that's I don't know. We're just planning to get back on track of how we were before the war started. Things are different, and sometimes.
So I was gonna say, like, how often does he have to go to to rehab? Yeah.
Rehab is twice a week. We can also do more. There's an organization for veterans, and they have kind of like centers, sports centers, or even kind of like a country club center, in main cities in Israel. Like I think there are 4 or 5 of them all over Israel. So there's one in Haifa. So we went and signed up there, and he'll be going there. They also have physical therapy and occupational therapy and hydrotherapy there. And they have
Wow.
a swimming pool, and they have different how do you say chugim?
Activities. Yeah.
Activities. So we're even thinking of signing up together for yoga for next year.
Nice.
So that's the plan. He has a lot of checkups in Tel HaShomer in the hospital, so we're driving a lot from Haifa to Tel Aviv area. But that's how it's gonna be. Trying to.
It's creating a new normal, basically.
Yes, exactly. Mamash a new normal.
Wow. The last question that I want to ask you before we conclude.
Talking about the new normal, just small anecdote.
No, yeah.
Yonatan is sitting across from me, sorting out his medications for the week as we speak. He has a lot of them.
How many pills does he take?
I don't know. Maybe like might be 19 or 20 a day. Different things. Things that also later might be less, but anyway, so that's one of the new things that.
I know that it's like you're normal, but like hearing other people hearing that a 24-year-old takes 19 or 20 pills, even though he's like functioning society, that's like, it's mind blowing. I just feel like we don't talk about it.
Well, people with different chronic diseases, that's their life. There are young people that's what they're dealing with.
Yeah. So my last question, and thank you for adding that. I think that's it is important to share and mention, is what you wish Am Yisrael, like our people, Jewish people worldwide, for the new year.
I wish that this year will be way better than the past year.
Okay.
Whatever that means. I wish for healing and quiet and getting back to some type of normal as much as we can, individually and nationwide.
Amen. That sounds good to me. So here, thank you very much, and stay, please. Thank you all for listening and joining. And if you have any questions, feel free to write in the comments below, and me or Naama will respond and answer. Thank you, Naama, for sharing about your experience and taking the time. And Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.